Welcome back to the channel. Now, in the last video, we had discussed, well, the first few videos, we discussed from the garden to the flood, and from the flood to the Tower of Babel. And now we're going to move forward in Genesis. Right around Genesis 11 is where we left off. So the lineage went on, and there was a man named Abram who God had pulled out and chosen for himself. So his father and him and his nephew Lot had gone out from Ur of the Chaldeans, and they settled they were moving towards Canaan. And so his father passed away, and God called him out and said, Abram, I want you to go to the land which I'm going to give to your descendants. And so this is Canaan he's talking about. And he said, I'm going to bless you on this journey, and those who bless you will be blessed, and those who curse you will be cursed. So he takes everything that's his. He was well off at that time. He had a wife named Sarai. Sarai, I believe is how it's pronounced at that time. So Abram took his wife, he took his belongings, he took his servants, he took his cattle, he took all of his livestock, whatever he had at that time, he took it all with him, and Lot came with him, and Lot had things as well. And they went out together, and they traveled as far as Negev. Now, he stopped and made an altar to the Lord because of what was happening. He had faith in God. He trusted him. Now, this is where it's a little bit interesting and a little bit tough. Now, he has a lot of stuff. He's living just fine. And God says, stop what you're doing and come follow me. Very similar to what Jesus did when he walked the earth. Stop what you're doing and come follow me. And because of that, he did. He had faith and he trusted, and he went and he did it. Now, he was 75 years old. That's the tough part. He wasn't a young chap, but I'm sure they lived much differently than we did. They ate better than we did. Their lifespan was different than ours. Their energy level at a certain age was different than ours. So he was moving forward in this journey. So they went out further to Negev in the journey to Canaan, to where God said, I'm going to give this land to your descendants. And there became a famine. And the famine was so great that he decided to sojourn down to Egypt. And he thought about something on the way into Egypt. He said to his wife, Sarai, you are an absolutely gorgeous woman. You're beautiful. And what will happen is they'll see the beauty of you, and because of that, they'll kill me to get to you. So can you do me a favor and just call yourself my sister on my part so that I'll live through this? And yeah, sure, that was a mistake because he lied. But here's what happened. He got down into the land, and just as he thought, Pharaoh's men saw her, and they saw the beauty of her, and they went to Pharaoh, and they were praising her and bragging about her. And so Pharaoh gave Abram a whole lot of stuff. He gave him servants, he gave him livestock, he gave him riches, and he took Sarai as his wife. Now, because of this, the Lord struck Pharaoh's house with a plague. And Pharaoh got up in the morning, or he was probably up all night, but in the morning he's like, this is wrong, something's wrong. So he goes to Abram and he says, why did you lie to me? Why didn't you tell me this was your wife? Why did you say it was your sister? And Abram's like, because. And Pharaoh said, look, take all the stuff I gave you, take your wife back, and go. Get out of here, leave this land. I don't want these curses anymore. I don't want this plague. So they moved back up, and this is Abram, his wife, and his nephew Lot. And as they're headed back up to Negev, and they're headed back to Canaan, the land where God was promising his descendants would reside, they had a little bit of strife between the two you'd say tribes, I guess. You know, him and Lot had a lot of servants, and they were beginning to argue with each other, and there was strife. So Abram said, take a listen here, Lot. I don't want any strife between you and I. So let's just go ahead and separate and divide. If you go to the left, then I'll go to the right. If you choose the right, then I'll go to the left. And so Lot looked around and he saw this whole valley in the Jordan, and he said, wow, this is absolutely beautiful. It's watered. It's much like Egypt. And that was the land where Sodom and Gomorrah were before the Lord destroyed them. So he said, I'm going to pick that side. And he headed in that direction, and he pitched his tent toward Sodom. Now, Sodom was an evil, wicked place, just like the Bible describes. It was full of wickedness. Abram moved in a different direction and went to Canaan. He went out in that direction and said, I'm going to go to where the Lord said. And he would build altars and he would call upon the Lord. And so with Bethel on the west, he had an altar that he had built to the Lord. So he headed in that direction and he began to settle there. And there was a lot of strife in that area. A lot of war basically was about to take place. There was 4 kings against 5 kings, and they were about to go at it. And so they began this war. And in the midst of this war, the king of Sodom and the king of Gomorrah went out to fight against the other kings, with the kings with them, their allies. And they had made tar pits. This is the other side, had made tar pits. And the king of Sodom and Gomorrah fell into the tar pits and had to bail and go to the hills. So they hightailed it to the hills and took all of their folks with them that they could get up there, took everything that they possibly could, and bailed out. Now, one of the survivors came back, and he began to talk to Abram and say, look, they took your nephew Lot. And he said, this is a problem for me. So he gathered his trained men, 318 of his trained men, and he said, let's go rescue him. So they began to devise this plan, and they headed out. And in the nighttime, Abram divided up his forces, and they attacked. And they went and they took back all the goods for Sodom, and they took back Lot as well. So when they get back to the valley in that area, the king of Sodom sends out a priest of the Most High and comes to greet him with bread and with wine. And he also says to him, hey, you can have a tenth, but he blesses him as well. He says, blessed be Abraham by the Most High God, and blessed be the Most High God for delivering this into Abram's hands. And so Abram and the king of Sodom begin to speak together, and the king says, here, you take this stuff. And he says, no, I don't want it, because then what's going to happen is I'm going to have to say, hey, the king made me rich. I don't want that. So I'll just take what the folks have eaten already, and I'll take my folks. You go ahead and give them some stuff if you want, but I want nothing. So at that point, he goes back and settles where he was. Lot goes back to Sodom. And this is about where we're going to stop in the story. At that time, the tough situations were, first and foremost, stop what you're doing and come follow me. Very hard for people to surrender and say, you know what, I'll stop what my desires, my goals, my dreams, and I'll go do what you say. But God does offer him something. He says, your descendants will be blessed, and you'll be a father of nations. And I'm going to show you the land that I'm going to give to your descendants. And the tough part again was he was 75 and he had no male offspring. So he just had to believe and have faith that this was going to happen. Now, he did believe, he followed through with it, and there's a lot more on his journey that takes place. But in this particular video, I just wanted to move forward from the Tower of Babel. As we got down the lineage, we got to Abram, and Abram was called out. And Abram was counted as a righteous man for his faith later on. So what he did throughout his life was quite difficult, but he saw it as an opportunity to just let God do what he does. And as you can see, he was successful so far in his ventures. There's a lot more to talk about with just this man, and the next video will be about that as well. But all of this leads up to, he's telling him, I have this land for you and your descendants. And that leads up to the story of the Messiah, where Jesus was born, where he resided, where he pushed out his ministry, began his ministry, where he was beaten, crucified, died, and rose again. Then he hung out for 40 days and he ministered to those folks and he taught. So all of this had to take place to get to that moment. The tough part was him surrendering and saying, okay, God, I'll stop what I'm doing, even though I'm well off, and I'll do what you want. So I hope that this video was informative. If you know the story, fantastic. This video was to begin the life of Abram, but also to tell you where it leads. It leads out to the story of salvation. So if you're interested in the next, stay tuned, and I pray that God would bless your day in Jesus' name.